What, you thought I was done? I'm not done. Oh, I'm not done. I'm only getting started here. Nolan. Okay, so I've got a lot of things to say, and today we're going to talk about Nolan's rendition of Agamemnon's armor, aka Ugly Batman, and then we will use the original source material, and I'll show you what it would have exactly looked like, and it's going to blow your mind. This is going to be the first place you have ever seen anything like this before. But before we do that, I've got a few nonsensical takes. So, on X, Eric Erickson says, sorry, y'all, but it is Christopher Nolan. I'll go see The Odyssey and probably enjoy it because it is Christopher Nolan. And I'm going to go into this assuming the guy who brought us Interstellar and The Dark Knight knows what he's doing better than Twitter. And for that, whoever you are, that's an idiotic take. I don't even need to argue with you. All I need to do is this. Okay, right? We're good? All right. Point debunked. Next. Frank J. Fleming. Christopher Nolan has a much better track record than perennially angry people online, so my trust remains with him. Odyssey could be terrible. I would not put my money on it, though. Yeah, wrong choice, mate. Wrong choice. Yes. The Odyssey absolutely is terrible. It's going to be awful. It's going to be disgusting. The casting is terrible. All of it. They should have cast Sydney Sweeney as Helen of Troy. I will die on this hill. As I've already said before, this is a face that launches 1,000 ships. This is Helen of Troy. This is Helen of Congo. Next, Yannis Papas. I don't care who plays who in the movies. It's make-believe. Acting in fantasy. Cultures are in fragile possessions. They're meant to be shared, exchanged, and transformed. I imagine you mean transformed. Greek culture doesn't belong to Greek DNA. Are you out of your mind? Absolutely, Greek culture belongs to the Greeks and all of us as an extension as a human species, but first and foremost, the freaking Greeks. Also, let me tell you why this is ridiculous. I'm not even going to continue reading this nonsense. I'm going to call them all out because you only get truth here. You know why this is false? Remove Greek and put African. African culture doesn't belong to African DNA. I don't care who plays who in the movies. It's make-believe. Acting is fantasy. Current cultures are in fragile possessions. So, Shaka Zulu's gonna be a blonde white guy with blue eyes. He's never gonna be okay with that. You filthy, lying piece of scum. Next. Metatron is on fire today. With that all addressed. But what about the costume department? Nolan is actually defending this. Check this out. Nolan, you clown. As I said in the previous video, I'm gonna flip at the table. Christopher Nolan is defending the historical accuracy of the armor. Can you believe that? So it's not that the guy is saying, oh no, this is just my own personal artistic device. No, he's saying it's historical. It's historical, bro. There are Mycenaean daggers that are black and bronze. The theory is they probably could have blackened bronze in those days. You take bronze, you add more gold and silver to it, and then you sulfur with Agamemnon. Ellen, our costume designer, is trying to communicate how elevated he is relative to everyone else. You do that through materials that would be very expensive. Fire her. Fired. Let's talk about the armor, shall we? Starting with the helmet, look, I get it. Maybe you're not the greatest fan of helmets which are produced using boar's tusks. Absolutely fine. Don't use this one, ditch it. Now, something really interesting about the boar's tusk helmet is that while it continues to appear in artistic representations at least until the end of the late Helladic period, meaning 1200 BC, so it would be period accurate, it's important to say that in the Odyssey it never appears at all, while in the Iliad it is mentioned, but only once. Odysseus wears it during his nocturnal mission alongside Diomedes. Moreover, Homer explains that the helmet had originally belonged to Amintor, king of Ilion in Boeotia, before being stolen by Autolycus, Odysseus' maternal grandfather. So, these details kind of suggest that by the time the helmet was regarded as a rare and prestigious relic rather than a commonly used piece of equipment, so we should not see it often or more than once in the movie either. So don't put this helmet on everyone. But when it comes to the armor proper, some people utilized AI to create an alternative version of the trailer whereby pretty much every single one of the Mycenaean soldiers and warriors is wearing the so-called Dendra panoply. This is a historically accurate type of armor that was used around that time, but the reality is that if I were the costume designer, I wouldn't even tell you to put Agamemnon on this, but in fact you should put Agamemnon on a type of armor which is related but more advanced than this, and we have specific descriptions, and it's gonna be incredible. So, this would absolutely be an improvement over Batman, but we can do so much better. Check this out. The Iliad itself describes Agamemnon's armor as being composed of 42 bands, 10 blackened, 12 gilded, and 20 made of copper. Imagine that for a moment. In fact, don't. Here is a representation of what that could have looked like, and then a second representation of what they could have looked like. The first one showing these segmented bands, each of these sets of segmented parts, copper, black and bronze, and gilded bronze, being functional, or the second representation which shows some of these to be decorative in nature. Either looks better than freaking Batman, doesn't it? So, scholars debate it. Are these structural components? Are they decorative embellishments? At that point, take your pick. Now, as you know, when the trailer for Nolan's Odyssey was released, a lot of people proposed the panoply from Dendra, this armor here, as the most convincing model for Homeric warriors, which was a heavy segmented Mycenaean bronze cuirass fitted with shoulder guards and high gorget to protect the neck. Yet it's essential to note that this armor dates approximately 1450 to 1400 BC. The Odyssey is based on real events, and there are specifically two warlike events that occurred. One was the invasions of the Mycenaean warrior in the Anatolian peninsula who moved hundreds of chariots, and this warrior was named by Hittite archives as Atarsia, which is the Hittite version or transliteration of the name Agamemnon, conducting military campaigns in Anatolia in 1400 BC. That is earlier than the traditional setting of the Trojan War. Likewise, in 1280, we have imperial archival mentions, once again from the Hittite Empire, that mention a Alexandru of Wilusa. Wilusa being the historical Troy, I'll talk more about it later, and the name Alexandru being a rendition of the Greek Paris Alexander, son of Priam, and abductor of Helen. So the chronological detail complicates the matter because the Dendra armor then could only be associated with the early incursions from Atarsia in the peninsula, but not with the later ones which connect to the actual siege of Troy. So in reality there is a much better option, and that would be a reconstructed armor for Agamemnon based on the Homeric descriptions, which we do have. So the fact that Nolan is now trying to defend, black bronze, well, hold on a minute, Homer tells us what it looks like. All right, noble ones, if I survive all of this and my blood pressure doesn't make my heart explode, I will see you on the next video, because I'm not done. I'm not done, Nolan. I'm not done. See you tomorrow. Crux of the matter. This is the one that annoyed me the most. C.E. Aubin. Rest of the video is dedicated to you. You guys know the Odyssey didn't really happen, right? It was a real thing that happened. It was made up. She says, my historian take on adapting things that didn't happen is you can pretty much just do whatever with it because it's not real, and that's okay. Okay. The Odyssey is not real. I'm just going to say this. I hate when people make statements without having spent 15 minutes studying a subject, which is clearly the case here. Not only we know that the war absolutely happened, the only thing that the epic poem, the Iliad and whatnot, the Odyssey, these epic poems, they are partial historical truth, partial myth. So, were there actually giants and sea creatures? No. But did the war happen? Absolutely yes. Are some of the kingdoms and armor and fighting tactics described real and actually happened in history? Yes. Now, temporally, there is a little bit of overlap in the Odyssey. I'm going to admit that, meaning that we see description of armed chariots, for instance, which for the time that this was written in, it would have been just an archaic form of warfare. But at the same time, they also describe close combat hoplite warfare, which instead would have been anachronistic for the time of the actual Battle of Troy. But all of this to say, we do have a little bit of space when it comes to the sort of tactics, war that is used when it comes to the Mycenaean culture. You don't have to be 1000% accurate. There is a little bit of space. But this idea that it's all made up, you're out of your fucking mind and you're out of your lane. You know nothing, Jon Snow. As I have mentioned on a dedicated video, we have a plethora of archival records that belong to the Hittite, in fact, of two different sets that tell us specifically about this conflict. We have historical Troy, we have the ruins. Archaeology points to a site where we know Troy happened, which, by the way, overlaps very neatly with the Hittite description. And we had two clearly distinct occurrences that could be perfectly fitting the ruins of Troy 6, a city with majestic tall walls, exactly as described by the Homeric tradition, that crumbled because of an earthquake. And you know what was a symbol of the Trojan horse? It symbolizes the god Poseidon, who is the god of the seas and earthquakes. So we have symbolic representation of an earthquake, and then we have the ruins that indicate that an earthquake absolutely happened in historical Troy 6, which is the site where we believe the conflict and the siege happened. We also have on top of that Troy 7a, which shows that the city was burnt because of war. We have fragmentary remains of later armor types discovered at Mycenae, Pylos and Phaistos, also Thebes, which indicate an evolutionary shift towards lighter and more flexible constructions at this time. These later types of armor appear to have reduced bulk and, in some cases, consisted of numerous metal strips attached to a linen foundation, increasing articulation and mobility, a development that may also be reflected in certain linear B records as shown on screen. Interaction with the Urnfield culture sphere, which supplied the late Mycenaean world with mercenary influences, contributed to the spread of new forms of armor throughout the Aegean. The warriors identified as the so-called Sea Peoples, who fought against Egypt during the 12th century BC and among whom Mycenaean elements were certainly present, are depicted wearing highly distinctive armor types. Similar representations also appear in Cypriotic art of the 12th and 11th century BC. These armors strongly resemble the bell-shaped cuirasses associated with the Urnfield culture, two-part metal cuirasses decorated with motifs that may represent stylized survivals of earlier curved, segmented functional elements transformed into ornamental designs. So, you've got, actually, as you can see, a lot of possible choices for the armor. So how he went for black and Batman bronze and says this is historical is mind-blowing. So you are a cretin. Thank you very much. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.